Peace and blessings, family. Welcome to the Mbongi. This is your brother, asarimhotep, with the Mandu Mandela Institute for the Advancement of Science and Culture and the Martin Delaney Center for Egyptology. Today is Monday, April the 19th, 2021, and we got with us a very special guest out of Philadelphia, Brother Akil Parker, who is a mathematician and historian and Africologist, and we're going to get it in today about mathematics, about Black people, about mathematics and Black people together, and how mathematics can be used as a tool, for the liberation of African people and on the individual level, the mind. So all that and more when we come back in just a sec. Blessings, blessings, blessings. Good morning, everyone. I know y'all used to seeing me at night, but we'll be doing a lot more shows in the daytime because all of our good brothers and sisters overseas be like, you do your shows too late. We can't catch them live. And, they're several hours ahead of us over here in the United States. So we'll do a balance of time and things. And so I welcome you and thank each and every one of you for joining us live. And then, of course, those of you who couldn't make it, but are catching the archives. We still got love for you as well. So, as always, make sure that you hit the like button and the subscribe button. And so that, this channel can grow. Make sure that you share this video. Is a very important video. So share with all your friends and family and, help us to get this information to more people. So I have a quick announcement, of course, for those of you who are new here. You may not know that we also have a Patreon. I have a Patreon page at patreon.com/asarimhotep. I'm in the midst of organizing and developing a documentary film called Chiena Into, which will demonstrate the relationship, the cultural relationship, the linguistic relationship, the historical relationship, and the philosophic relationship between ancient Kemet or Egypt and Bantu societies. And we'll demonstrate how ancient Kemet was in fact a Bantu society, and the film will get into exactly what all that means. So, by joining the Patreon at the different levels, you'll be able to contribute to the making of the film as well as to the upkeep of this channel. So make sure that y'all support the Patreon page and the like. And I don't have a flyer up yet, but this Friday we're going to be interviewing Sister Stephanie Renee, also out of Philly. And some of y'all may not know her in particular in terms of anything, but she is a singer of house music and also a DJ and also a documentarian. And she produced a documentary film back in the day titled, I think, No Such Thing as Neo Soul. She has an online radio station called Soul Sanctuary, and very, very good down to earth sister. So we're going to have her on this Friday, and so we're just ironing out the exact time. So keep locked in your ears to the streets, as they say. And, especially if you're subscribed, you'll know, because as soon as I register the show, you'll get the notice that for the times and things. So I want to say that to each of y'all. So peace and blessings to Sister Tamika One, Donnie Williams in the chat, Sylvain Colombo and Sapo. All the way out. He's actually from Congo, but he's out there in Belgium. So we got people in Belgium. In this mug, Stephen McKenzie, Brother Mathis, OG Gorilla out of New York, Dash Arab, Non-Swirl Zone, and The Real Nordic Black. Peace, peace. Yes, and I had a good interview. Please, Brother Nordic, and moved up. Give me the link to the interview that we did yesterday, so I can share that with the family, if you can. So either if it doesn't come up in the chat, if you can't put it in the chat, put it in the comment section, and I'll still be able to get it and share it with the people. So Priest of Yah Incas. And all the way from Norway, our good brother, the Real Nordic Black. So holding it down for us there. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our guest this morning. And so let me read from his bio. Our good brother Akil Parker is an adjunct professor teaching math education courses at both Cheney University and LaSalle University. Additionally, he teaches math courses down north Philly at One Bright Rays Night School for Adult Learners. He is also the founder of All This Math, LLC, a company that offers private math tutoring and mathematics educational consulting. Prior to this, he had a 14-year career as a traditional high school math teacher at various charter and public schools within the school district of Philadelphia. He has taught mathematics and history in Upward Bound programs at Temple University and the University of Pennsylvania, as well as several other extracurricular programs. He is a graduate of both Morgan State University with the BS in Finance and Lincoln University with the Master's in Education and Educational Leadership. His 5 children have heavily influenced his understanding of the necessity for education as a vehicle for the acquisition of power by people of African descent globally. He is also affiliated with several organizations that have helped shape his socio-political and cultural awareness, such as ASCAC, that is the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations, AHSA, African Heritage Studies Association, and APRP, All African People's Revolutionary Party. He also writes for multiple newsletters and periodicals on various topics relevant to the global African community. And we are blessed to have our good brother on the program today. So welcome, Brother Akil. How you doing this morning?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I'm humbled to be here, in your space, because I know the type of work you've been doing, for years. Well, before I even met you, I knew the work you were doing. You represented you.
Appreciate it. Appreciate it. The honor is mine, though. The honor is mine. So yeah, you are new to the program here. So, we start off with a little background, tell us, where you're from. And well, we already read where you went to school, but how did you get interested in mathematics of all the subjects that a lot of us run from, with track shoes on? You choose mathematics. And so what was that journey, coming from exactly where you were from in your education that way? And then what were your influences that shaped you into this particular path?
Well, I would say that very early on, there was a brief moment in my past when I was homeschooled for about a year, and my mother was teaching me, and my mother taught me, gave me somewhat of a solid foundation in mathematics when I was at a very young age, around the age of like maybe 5 or 6. That's when I was living in New York. I was born in New York, but I spent my formative years in Baltimore. So, I'm essentially from Baltimore, right? That's where I spent my formative years. We moved to Baltimore when I was about 8 years old. And I had some moments when, I ran from math too. I had my track shoes on, a little bit, but I was a sprinter. I wasn't a long distance runner, but that's only because like I had some years where I got it, and then I had some years where I didn't get it. But I will say that when I was in 9th grade, there was a pivotal moment where I had actually right before 9th grade, the summer before 9th grade, I was in a summer program, this college prep summer program, enrichment program at University of Maryland in Baltimore County called the Horizons Exploration Program. And I had a teacher there, a man named Sam Brown. And Sam Brown was also a teacher at Baltimore Polytechnic Institute, which was the high school that I was about to start at as a freshman that fall. And he was the math teacher. So I was, I'm there, I'm on campus, I'm, just girls all over the place. I'm like 13 years old. I'm out of my mind. I'm really enjoying myself. And he gave a test and I failed the test. And when he returned the test, he put it face down on my desk, and he kind of, as a grown, I'm 13 years old. And, I already had a certain type of relationship with my own father, where he kind of like raised me a certain way and would be kind of stern and let me know when he was disappointed and let me know when I needed to tighten up and straighten my act up. And this black man gave me that same type of energy. And he kind of looked at me and just let me know, like, I'm disappointed in you. And I know you can do better than this. And I knew I could do better than this than what I did. I failed the test. And, because I really didn't study. I didn't apply myself and I didn't study. But him just doing that just was like, all right, I gotta get on point. And I did much better in mathematics for the remainder of that summer. And then when I started at Poly, as we call it in Baltimore, that my Algebra 2 instructor. And we had this program where we took 2 math courses concurrently. So I took out as a freshman, I took Algebra 2 for the whole year, and I took geometry for the whole year as well. I had another black man, Mr. Joshua Bessics. He was my geometry teacher. And, this brother, he was real sharp, real smooth. You kind of remind me of Teddy Pendergrass. He had the smooth, sweaters and, real clean cut. And, I liked his teaching style. But at first I didn't like it because, I didn't understand proofs. But once I understood geometric proofs and I realized that, oh, this is all you got to do. Okay, you just got to understand the theorem and then apply it. And then you're kind of just telling the story and proving why this will happen in this situation. Geometry was cool, from that moment on. But I think a large part of my solid foundation, I had some good teachers in middle school. I had some good teachers in elementary school that taught me a lot of things. But having I would say having those 2 black men in 9th grade really kind of put me on and, give me that solid foundation in algebra, and make it look easy. Like, they would just be at the board, like, this is all you got to do, basically. Like, that's all you got to do. Just step 1, step 2, step 3. And then you kind of look at it like a video game. Like when you're playing video games, once you realize like what the cheat codes are, what the patterns are for the little enemies that you're fighting against. And you say, okay, every time I get to this level, I got to follow this route. I got to follow this path. I got to go do step 1, step 2, step 3. And that's how I'm gonna win. I'm gonna beat the level, right? Every single time. I guess I started approaching math problems the same way, and then I had a lot of practice and a lot of opportunities to, approach the math problems. So then I developed what I tell my students, like a mathematical muscle memory. And I think that's what happens with a lot of our students. They don't get the opportunity to develop the mathematical muscle memory because they don't get enough practice. Like you have a lot of teachers that are good teachers that can teach you how to do it, but the real learning and the real, internalization of the skills comes from the practice, like doing 10 problems one night, doing another 10 problems the next night. And a lot of times the way the curricula is structured and the way the classroom setting is structured, and the way teachers are under pressure to kind of be like a mile wide and inch deep in terms of like how they approach, the different lessons in their curriculum, the students will get a chance to get that practice in, So, it's kind of like, again, in terms of mathematical muscle memory, I liken it to like an athlete, an athlete, basketball player. They might shoot 200 free throws every day at practice, and then constantly doing figure eight drills or whatever in any sport. And like, we really have to approach math the same way. We got to like look at that the same way. That's my definite opinion. So that's, my background in math and, in high school. And I did, like I said, I had some rough spots. 12th grade, I wasn't that strong. 12th grade, I was taking calculus. I really wasn't taking things seriously. I knew that by December, once I got accepted to the college I wanted to go to, my grades really didn't matter anymore. So I really wasn't applying myself as much. I mean, I still wanted to finish strong, but I wasn't really applying myself as much. And I kind of didn't do as well in calculus 12th grade, but then I took calculus again that summer, because for my freshman year of college, I ended up going to Morehouse. I transferred from Morehouse after the end of my freshman year, but for the freshman year, I went to Morehouse, and then summer program. So I guess I also want to emphasize to, parents that are listening, always try to seek out, extracurricular programming, because the public school and the charter school in most cases is not meant to give your children enough. So, I want to thank my parents for always seeking out extracurricular opportunities, whether it was summer programs, whether it was Saturday programs, whether it was after school programs, where I could get, something to supplement, what I was getting in school Monday through Friday, and get more than that, so I could have a competitive advantage. But yeah, when I was a rising freshman at Morehouse College, there was a summer program down there, and my math professor, and I didn't notice at the time, I didn't value this at the time, but he was the world-renowned, the late Dr. Abdul Alim Shabazz, who is credited, I believe, with training probably more Black math PhDs than anyone. I'm not sure what the data is now at this point, but at that point he was teaching at Clark Atlanta at the time, and he came over to Morehouse to teach the summer program, the summer program for us, the Center of Excellence program. And he also, I think he finished his career at Grambling, or maybe Lincoln. I'm not sure. I know he taught at Lincoln, taught at Grambling. He went to Lincoln for undergrad. Clark Atlanta. And so yeah, I had that opportunity. I took calculus with him that summer, and I did better in it than I had done, as a senior at Poly. And then, but then I ended up changing my major. I ended up majoring in finance, because I was trying to get money, I was trying to chase a bag, back then. Just wanted to be a capitalist and get rich. That's all I wanted to do. So I ended up, when I transferred to Morgan, I was still a finance major. I graduated with a degree in finance. And then I ended up working for the FDIC for a year. That's when I moved to Philly, because I was working out of the office in Delaware, and I didn't want to live in Delaware. So, out for me. So I was kind of in flux, had some things going on. I had a baby on the way, and, I didn't want to I knew I needed to be able to take care of my child. I needed full-time employment. So, I ended up doing substitute teaching, which led to full-time math teaching. And the reason I taught math was because I was always strong at math for the most part. And people always tell me, even my father's an educator still to this day. Father's been teaching for like over 40 years, or almost 40 years, I should say. If you're a Black man and you can teach math, you can write your own ticket. So that kind of like, I was kind of constantly being reminded of that. That was in the back of my mind. So I said, well, why don't I, try to teach math? So I started out with a long-term substitute position at a charter school in North Philly called Mariana Brissetti, and a substitute position for a 10th grade geometry class. And, that's a little challenging, because you're a substitute teacher, and as a substitute teacher, your job is just to babysit, make sure nobody kills anybody, and, take roll, basically. That's really your job. But then if you're going to be a long-term sub, you can't just do that for like 2 months. You can't do that for 2 months. You got to, have some lesson plans and really teach some stuff. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to teach some stuff. So, I ended up teaching. That's when I started. So that was like 2005. That was like spring of 2005. And, I kind of never looked back. I mean, I've definitely, learned and kind of, I see some less effective and more effective ways of delivering education to our people, to our youth. So, while I still think education is very important, I do think the I have changed my opinion in terms of the delivery method. In terms of how we should do it, I definitely understand that we definitely need independent African-centered schools if we want to be independent and African-centered, you know. So that's kind of my background, you know, how I became, you know, a math teacher. And I kind of in the last couple of years, I started, you know, teaching on the college level. So now I'm training future teachers, you know, how to teach math, and so they can benefit from a lot of the mistakes that I've made in the classroom. And I also try to be very intentional and let them know that, you know, the goal is not even just to teach in the public school system or the charter school system. The goal is for us to have independent schools. So while I'm teaching you these skills to be able to teach our children, it's important for you to also be thinking, you know, more long term in terms of how you can be instrumental in creating independent educational spaces. Because even though, like, you know, it's nice, like I mentioned my story about having those two brothers in ninth grade as my math teachers, and they were very influential and very integral to my development. I think we still need, you know, to have independent schools that we control, where there could be brothers and sisters that are teaching the young brothers and sisters, you know, because again, it's like, you know, I always think about Dr. Clark when we hear about these programs and these initiatives to increase the number of Black male teachers. I think that's important, and I think that's a valuable goal. But I can't help but being constantly reminded of the words of the late Dr. John Henry Clark when he talks about, you know, pouring clean water into a dirty glass. You know, you pour the clean water into a dirty glass, you know, the water might be great, might be the most pure water in the world, but, you know, would you still drink it? You know? So again, I think the end goal should definitely be, you know, independent spaces so we can get that clean glass, because you want the clean water in the clean glass. That's the goal.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the, because me and a colleague were talking about this in terms of like how many Black male teachers have you had, you know, growing up, and like I can only recall maybe outside of coaches, you know, because I played football, I ran track, and I played basketball. But luckily, my football coach was also our chemistry teacher, and but I think I may have maybe 4 in terms of, like, you know, elementary to 12th grade, maybe 4 Black male teachers, and so we were showing the importance of that. And I was like, one of the things that one of my hypotheses was why you don't see that many Black male teachers is because of the role that Black men have to have in this society as the quote unquote breadwinner. So we always hear about teachers not getting paid enough, right, you know, and things of this nature. So it's not an attractive field for a lot of men to go through initially, especially if they have to, you know, say, and support a family and things of this nature. And so we rather go like how you, because I started off in accounting before I went into computer information systems. And so, but it was for that reason, like, you know, that's where the money is, you know, in terms of a job and things of that nature. But I wanted to ask you, you know, like where, so we get the math, right, in terms of brother Akil, but, you know, where does the historiography come from, the African-centered consciousness, and what is this, you know, because you out here making up words and stuff, like htematics, like what is htematics, and how does all of this, you know, correlate with each other?
All right. Well, yeah. Okay. That's an excellent question. That's an excellent question, because that ties directly into all of this as well. So again, I gotta take it back to the parents and give them their flowers. We lived in New York when I was born, and my father was a teacher, and my mother was, when I was very young, she was a student at Hunter College, and she actually took courses with John Henry Clark and also with Marimba Ani. back when she was still Donna Richards and when she was working on Yoruba way before it was even published. My mother was one of her students, in those classes. And I don't remember this consciously because I was probably like 3 years old, but my mother has told me that, sometimes she couldn't always get a babysitter. So she would take me, down to Hunter College with her, and I would sit in class with her. And also they had like an after school program, an African-centered after school program that I would, be a part of. And then they had Kwanzaa. So that's when we got introduced to Kwanzaa. I was celebrating Kwanzaa since I was born. Kwanzaa is like in my DNA, So that was my background. In the house we had the map of Africa on the wall. We had big, huge picture of Marcus Mosiah Garvey. So all those things were normalized and kind of inbred in me from birth. So it wasn't as if I had to go to college and be awakened by like an African American studies professor. Which not to take away from that because that's important too. And I would actually say that I did have a similar experience to people that kind of come into African centeredness or African consciousness in that way, because I found that as I got older and, growing up, going through high school and whatnot, I didn't think that was cool. I didn't think that African stuff was cool. So I kind of got away from it. But I came back to it years later because it was easy to come back to it because it was kind of inbred in me early on, kind of like, I guess, like what the prodigal son story, prodigal son's return was kind of like that. So I always think about that. As a matter of fact, when I started writing, I created a pseudonym for myself, Omawale Maroon. When I learned what Omawale meant when I was studying Malcolm X, and I saw that when he went to, I think, was it Nigeria or Ghana, he got renamed Omawale Malcolm X. Omawale means that, the son has returned. So I named my, but yeah, so I would say, yes, I started teaching around 2005. And then I got involved with Philadelphia Freedom Schools. So Philadelphia Freedom Schools is very important. I got the opportunity to be an academic advisor at Philadelphia Freedom Schools. At Philadelphia Freedom Schools, I was introduced to Dr. Greg Carr. Probably a lot of people watching this are probably already familiar with Dr. Greg Carr down at Howard University, the chair of the Africana Studies Department down there. And, just the way he, was teaching and the way he would just provide references and he would make things relevant, and he was really just, a Jegna, just a great storyteller. And, he would just connect in everything to contemporary times, and it just made sense. And then just being in the Philadelphia Freedom School space with all those types of people, it made reading seem cool, and it made African consciousness seem cool as well. So then I started really getting into the reading, and at the same time, as a teacher, I was also coming to the realization that my students looked to me as a role model, not just a math teacher, but as a role model, as a black man, like their old head, like an OG. And a lot of them would come to me with questions just about life and just things in general. And then I sat and I thought to myself one day, I said, wow, like if they're asking me all these questions, I need to have some answers, and I need to have some correct answers. So I felt as though a lot of the answers were in books. Books about society, books about our history, books about our experience and our existence. So that just really motivated, being a teacher really motivated me to read even more. And then what would happen is during class, and this is kind of where htematics comes from, during my classes, I would always end up having, during my math classes, whether it was a geometry class, an algebra 1 class, a pre-calculus class, an algebra 2 class, whatever math class it was, statistics, I would end up finding ways to organically start having these conversations around topics that the students would only be used to hearing in a history class, or especially an African American studies class, right? So, and they would always say like, "Oh, Mr. Parker, you should be an African American studies teacher. Or you should be an African American history teacher." Because in our African American history teacher, we don't really be learning nothing. He just put a bunch of notes on the board, and we just copy them down, and he gives an open book test every Friday. And that's why everybody get an A. All you got to do is come to class and just have your notes. But you should really teach that. And so that kind of became my thing. And every school I went to, every school I taught at, I would end up just having these organic conversations because that's what I'm interested in. So what I realized was, what if I could try to like codify it and like formalize it into like an actual framework where I'm combining both, right? So it's not an issue if like I'm being observed by a principal on a certain day, and on my lesson plan, it's a geometry class, and we're supposed to talk about the segment addition postulate that day. But then I go off on a tangent because a student asked me something about Mumia Abu-Jamal, and then I talk for 15 minutes about Mumia Abu-Jamal. Like, what if I could just, instead of me getting penalized for that by that principal who really doesn't care about Mumia Abu-Jamal or understand the significance of Mumia Abu-Jamal, and just wants me to just be this, like, just stick to the theorem, stick to the formulas. That's it, right? What if I can like combine it in a way that makes sense? So even that evaluator or that principal, when they come in and see it, they say, oh, wow, like, so the students are actually learning the segment addition postulate, but they're learning about Mumia Abu-Jamal also at the same time. So it's almost like you don't even notice, it's like you have to ask the question, like, is this a geometry class? Is this an African American history class? Like, which is it? Like, I don't know. It's almost like it's debate. It's almost like it's up for debate what type of space it is. So that's kind of where htematics came from. And then I, kind of developed it out, and I presented on it at a conference, at the Teaching Black History Conference back in 2019 through the Carter Center out at the University of Missouri. And it has 5 elements: numerical one element, African-centered word problems is another element, the statistics of the African experience is another element, and then there's the African experience, mathematical experiential models. I talk about things like yesterday, I was tutoring a young brother, and was solving equations with radicals. And what I realized is it's like the way we solve the way we do certain math is a reflection of a social reality. So when you're solving an equation with radicals, like let's say you have like the square root of x times 3 is equal to the square root of x plus 5. The steps in the process are isolate the radical, then eliminate the radical. And so that's how I understand it. And that's how I teach it. When I do the problems, that's how I understand it. Isolate the radical and eliminate the radical. And that's how I teach it. So what I see that is like, it's an organic moment where it's like, wait, this is what happens in real life. This is what happens with people that, consider them politically radical. We talk about the Black radical tradition, and people that would consider themselves part of the Black radical tradition. What do governments do to them? What do corporations do to them? What do nations try to do to them? You want to isolate the radical from the masses. You want to discredit them in some type of way, so people won't listen to what they're saying. People won't want to follow them, right? People won't want to rise up as a result. And then you want to eliminate them some kind of way, either incarcerate them, like I mentioned, Mumia Abu-Jamal, right? Like you want to incarcerate them, or you want to create smear campaigns against them, or you want to just kill them, just assassinate them, right? So in mathematics, we kind of do the same thing with that particular type of problem. And then that's a way, because it's like, there have been moments in years past when I taught this method and I taught how to solve this type of equation, and I wasn't thinking about that. So I wasted a great opportunity to open up my students' minds to politics and political science and our actual experience here as African people, because this is really what happens, right? And that's element 4. So then element 5 is just mathematical exemplars. And I'm actually working on a project over the last couple of days where I've been doing some research on some, on black mathematicians, just people that really did math. Because, when you think about it, a lot of our young people, they would never consider becoming a mathematician because, you don't see mathematicians in the hood. Like, you don't see mathematicians around your way. You don't even really see black math teachers, like somebody might know me, but I'm like, I'm rare. And I don't even know a whole lot of black math teachers. I know some, but it's expected for me to know a lot because I am a teacher. I'm in that space. But if you're not in that space, then you won't even think that that's a real thing. You won't even think that they exist. So that's where htematics comes from, like my desire to, and then of course also like studying like the African-centered worldview in contrast to a European-centered worldview where things are more compartmentalized generally. I see Western education is very compartmentalized. Like, okay, I gotta sit in this room for an hour, and we'll talk about math. We'll solve some equations. Then a bell rings. Then I gotta collect my stuff, walk down the hallway, go to another room, sit in that room for an hour. And we're going to talk about science. And it's almost as if, even though people speak about the connections between math and science because it's much easier to see, it's almost as if those two things are totally unrelated. At least that education is delivered, right? Or even in an English class, English has nothing to do with math, right? People even say, and this is something I think we have to attack within our own community. When people say, well, I'm a math person, I'm not a reading person. When people say, well, I'm a reading person, I'm not a math person. The problem with that is that when you accept that and embrace that ideology, then it's like, okay, now we're in a math class and it's time to do some word problems. So when it's time to do the word problems, I'm thinking, well, I'm a math person, I'm not a reading person. So you're not even thinking about those skills that you would be taught in a ELA class or a language arts class or a literature class that you still need in order to solve mathematical word problems. You need to identify key information, you need to identify themes, you need to look for context clues, you need to define vocabulary terms, all these things that are taught in an ELA class. But when I approach word problems, those are the things you have to do before you even get to the equation, because what happens is there are plenty of students. I've had plenty of students, and I've seen plenty of students, and we've all, as people, someone can probably give you an equation and say, here, solve this equation. And there are a lot of people that can solve the equation, solve for X easily. But if I give you a word problem that could be translated into that equation, you would not know how to translate that equation. That's not even as much of a mathematical issue as it is more of a reading comprehension issue. And I think that because we compartmentalize everything, or at least that's the way the Western school system is set up, we're meant to compartmentalize everything. Then there's like so much confusion where like we really should be like focusing on like, combining like the requirements of reading successfully and critical reading and mathematical capacity and aptitude. And you probably could definitely speak to that with like all the heavy work you do with linguistics.
That's what I was just about to say. Like, in my opinion, I think just a second language, of course, I prefer for our people an African language, should be taught. And I think for most schools, you're required to learn, a second language. But people don't really understand the nature of having to translate from one language to another. And that's exactly what you're doing in mathematics in terms of the word problem. So like, you'll hear a lot of mathematicians talk about mathematics as a language. If it is a language, then to a degree, it needs to be taught as such. And so if if they know how to translate, like como te llama into English or something to this nature from another language, then they'll be used to having to think in another language and understand, the grammar and syntax, saying of this and what the signs and symbols. And this is why, like, for me, the teaching of the Sesh Meta-Neter, the Egyptian hieroglyphs, is important to this process as well. Because, not only do, we require you to read the Meta-Neter and transliterate and then translate into English, but how do you translate English into Meta-Neter? And so you're already working with symbols and knowing that you can translate words or swap out words or phrases into some kind of symbolic representation to make a sentence. And even with the math equations, it's, you can read them like sentences, and a lot of us don't read it like that, in terms of translating, live the actual equation, into a particular type of sentence. So, and with that being said, I wanted to, I think we talked about this briefly offline. And for those of you who were with us at the last program, I talked about, this concept of being an African-centered high-value man. And I gave 10 characteristics and I'll be doing follow-up programs, going into this in more depth. And the next one I'm going to be doing is, an African-centered high-value man from a Congo perspective. And so that'll be sometime this weekend. But I wanted to highlight number 5 here, which says, knows the art of unveiling life's mysteries, aka a problem solver. And I think that the mathematics training will help us to be better problem solvers, because that's essentially what mathematics is. It's rooted in logic, and has to deal with the ability to make or be able to distinguish a bad or a good argument, and it solidifies those juices or stirs up those juices to be able to creatively think of solutions, or many different directions, or many different ways that you can solve a problem, because some equations you can do it in different ways and still get to the same answer. And so I want you to touch on what are those, and I think you already have to a degree, but kind of emphasize what are those extra unintended benefits for doing and understanding mathematics that people may not be aware of, that transcends that immediate need to find the answer to the equation, that's solving for X in that particular instance.
So what I would say in terms of that is that, like, doing mathematics and as a practice, and approaching mathematical problems and algebra problems and geometric problems, it trains us intellectually in terms of how to think systematically, and how to as you mentioned, make sound arguments. And it trains us to try to look for inconsistencies, and it trains us to expose contradictions, because when we're solving an equation, when we go back to check our work, I always tell students, always check your work, go back and check your work, because really, I often talk about how mathematics is about finding truth. Because if I solve an equation, if I'm given an equation, which we can say an equation approximates a problem, right? And I want to know what value of X, what number out of all the numbers in the universe, right? In the real number system or the imaginary number system, when it gets more complex, which number will make this a true statement? Like, which will give me the truth? So if I solve the equation and I get X equals 5, but then I take 5, and I should be able to take 5 and I should be able to replace the letter X in the original equation and do the mathematical operations, and the left side should equal the right side. Just like even people that, may not purport to be good at math, all at one time or another have said, listen, something ain't adding up. Somebody's lying, right? So if the left side equals the right side, then that means that we have found the truth. So 5 is the number that will give us the value that we need. So it's about critical thinking, and it's about identifying, processes and steps. And some problems take longer than others to solve. Some problems may take 2 steps. Some problems may take 10 steps. And as you also mentioned, there are often different ways to solve problems. Again, when we talk about, Western society versus, African-centered, worldview, a lot of times, and, students are taught in a monolithic way, whereas like there's only one way to do this problem, and you can't do it another way. So if you're in 7th grade and your 7th grade math teacher taught you how to solve this particular type of problem this way, then you get to 8th grade, and your 8th grade teacher's teaching you a different way. A lot of people have mental breakdowns, right? They experience like cognitive dissonance. Like, wait, what are you doing? What are you doing? We didn't learn it this way. And then you kind of have to talk them off the ledge and say, wait, listen, okay, that's fine. Yes, that method is correct also. But I want you to add this to your tool belt, so to speak. I want you to be able to solve this problem in this other way as well. Because what you might find is that depending on what the particular original problem looks like, the method that you learned in 7th grade might be more effective and more efficient. But then in the case of some problems, this method might be more effective and efficient. So you want to have like multiple methods, to pull from, such as in life. Like you want to be able to have different ways to solve problems, depending on the details and the circumstances of the problem, the environmental conditions around you, because if you only have one way to solve a problem, and then, but that method only works when it's 90 degrees outside, then it's like, what you going to do when it's snow on the ground? Like, what are you going to do? Right. You're stuck basically. So we want to also give students and give people multiple methods. And you also have to have concrete and explicit conversations with them about them not being uncomfortable when someone does that. Because oftentimes, students will really, it becomes an emotional thing. Like, it's like, wait, what are you doing? What are you doing? Like, no, we don't do it we don't do it that way. We don't do it that way. And again, so again, in terms of an experiential model, when we thinking back to like htematics, that's something that can be reflected in our social reality, because there are a lot of people that are like, no, there's only one way we can do this. We can't apply multiple. And while I do believe that in terms of some things, there should be one way to do it, I think there are some things in some areas where we do have, like, we should have multiple options.
So you're saying that mathematics is not a religion where they're claiming there's only one path, saying to the truth.
I would say there are multiple paths within mathematics, to the truth. Yeah. And I say that we should embrace that. I say we should embrace that, and that should actually give us. I think we have to shift the paradigm, and we have to teach children to become comfortable with that, with there being multiple ways, even if they don't want to use the multiple ways. It's like, I want you to learn the three ways of doing this problem, even if you don't want to use it. And I think that presents itself now with a lot of, when people talk about the new math, and I understand the frustration that parents have, talking about Common Core, and because 20, 30 years ago, when I learned how to do long division, I learned how to divide numbers. We were taught long division. That was it, long division. You draw the, put the divisor outside, put the long division symbol, put the dividend inside, and then you just do it. Divide, multiply, subtract. You follow the pattern. Now there's partial quotients. There's division by the box method, and just the idea that we're not just doing long division can be uncomfortable for people. And I get it. I understand it. But it's since I've had to teach it to students at Cheney, more recently, I've developed an appreciation for those multiple methods. Because then when you start doing it, you're like, wait, actually, long division is cool, but I actually like division by the box method better. And then you're like, wait, I wish somebody had taught me this 30 years ago. Because if they had taught me this 30 years ago, I would have had probably a better overall understanding of math conceptually. Because that's another thing too. I will say that putting myself out there, I did well in math and I got strong grades at math generally, but I didn't really, I understood processes, right? I understood processes, but I didn't understand concepts. So conceptually, a lot of times I didn't understand what I was doing. I knew how to do the problem. I knew how to solve the equation, but I didn't know why that method worked because I didn't understand the concept. And we have to start teaching our children that as well, because what happens is when they get to the standardized tests, they get to like the SAT, that's when they create those questions that are very, that are more difficult because they're not straightforward. They're not like straightforward. Like they're like challenging you to really think about, you have to know, okay, well, why does this method work? Like, the method, and that's great. You know the method, you can solve the equation, but now you got to think about, okay, why does it work? And I was the type of student, I'm like, listen, man, just give me the formula. Let me, where do I put the A to B to C, like the quadratic formula? I'm never thinking about like, oh, that's derived from completing the square, and this is why this works. I never thought about none of that. Just give me the quadratic formula. I'll memorize it, and then tell me what A, B, and C is. I'll replace the letters with numbers, and I can just rock out, and I'll get the answer. But I never even thought about, okay, well, but why does it work? But again, there are a lot of stresses and pressures in the school system and generally, where a lot of teachers, either they don't know, the concept behind it, or they don't have the time. They have to make a judgment call. They have to say, okay, should I spend the time to really take a deep dive into this so they can like conceptually understand this, and then sacrifice exposing them to these other skills, or what? Like, what should I do? So again, that's something else we got to think about. Like, what is the concept of the math that we're teaching, you know, as opposed to just the process. I mean, sometimes you just need the process, you know, when you have time constraints, especially when you're dealing with like adult learners. Sometimes listen, I'm just trying to get my GED so I can move on with my life. You know, I get a raise at my job, you know, whatever. When I get this, that's cool. That's real life. That's a real life situation. You know, for them, you know, somebody in that situation is like, okay, I'll teach you the process. Just memorize these steps. You'll be fine. And if you want to later on, maybe go back and understand the concept, you know, but it depends. But I think we do need to emphasize more the idea of developing conceptual understanding of math, you know, because then it won't be it won't be so uncomfortable, because a lot of people aren't good with memorizing processes and steps. They're just not good at that. A lot of people are good at understanding a concept. When they understand a concept, then they can figure out what the steps would be because they know the concept.
Yeah, this is something that is an issue, especially when you're teaching people coding. And so in computer science, you know, it's one thing to just know the syntax and what code goes where. But if you're trying to dream up a solution that hasn't been done before, and you don't understand the whys behind the code, then that's where a lot of people get stuck. And you know, like I remember back in the day wondering, like, where do people get these equations from? Like what makes you think in terms of equations and all of that? But before we move forward, I just want to remind folks to that's right, hit the like and the subscribe if you have not subscribed to the channel. We are, for those of you who are just joining us, we are with our good brother Akil Parker, who is a professor and teacher of mathematics and htematics, which we were just touching on. And I wanted to know if you've heard of this text or read this text and heard of this person here, and if so, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so this is one of the texts that kind of, you know, inspired me to take math teaching a lot more seriously. And so this what he's doing in this is really, it is htematics, you know. So he was htematics before htematics. You know, so Bob Moses, and I had the opportunity to actually meet him again through Philadelphia Freedom Schools back in 2009. He came to the training. He was one of the keynote speakers at our training. And what he's doing in the book is he's taking what his experience with SNCC, because he was a member of SNCC back in the 60s, along with Marimba Ani. I think at one point they were married at one point. You know, so him and Charles Cobb were SNCC organizers, and Charles Cobb was actually very instrumental with developing the Freedom School model back in the 60s for the local people in Mississippi. So they understood the power of, you know, independent educational spaces and teaching the people. So it wasn't only about voter rights and, you know, voter registration. It was about much more than that, about developing the community and providing you know, education to the community. And one of the things he says in that book is that he's of the belief that mathematical literacy or mathematics education is the civil rights issue of the 21st century. That's his claim. That's his claim in that book. And what he's doing in the book is he's taking a lot of the skills that he learned and that a lot of the SNCC membership learned while organizing and mobilizing people and organizing people in the South, and he's applying it to like mathematics education. And then I know he has a program called the Algebra Project, which was adopted in the Baltimore City public school system, I want to say, at one point. I don't know if the Baltimore City public school still uses it, but I know they definitely were using it, and maybe some other school systems. I think Miami might be using it. But this book is important, you know, and it talks about, you know, math. And one of the things he also says is that this is a goal for us. This is a goal for us as a community. Every Black child should be by the freshman year of college, or by the time they graduate from a high school, they should be calculus ready. They should be calculus ready at a minimum, meaning ready to sit in a Calc 1 class, first semester, fall semester, freshman year, and be able to do well, and not, well, if they do poorly, it's not because, well, they really don't understand trigonometry. You got to know the trig ratios. You know, you got to understand sine, cosine, and tangent. You can't do Calc 1 if you don't know, you can't deal with the derivatives that deal with sine, cosine, and tangent, because might have never took that class, or you might just not understand it. So that's another thing that he says, and that's something, and again, that's where all this math comes into play, because, I believe that, Malcolm X, one of his most famous quotes, only a fool would send his children to be educated by his enemy. And I think that, but we always get into this conversation about, well, we would like independent schools, and people, hear me talk about independent schools, and it kind of like, it sounds good in theory, but it's like, but Akil, like, 100 children, where are these independent schools at? They don't exist. Where are we going to take our kids at? It's kind of like when we talk about nation building. We talk about nation building, we need an independent nation, and then people that are very much wedded to and tethered to like the Democratic Party or to this current system. We say, well, where's this nation at? Where is it at? Let's go. All right, you got this, and the thing is, like, no, like it has to be built, and it might not even be built like we talked about. It might not even be built in our lifetime, but we have to work toward that goal. That has to, at a minimum, that has to be the goal. So, in terms of all this math, what I would like for all this math to be is a tool and a vehicle online, where we as a household, or as a Black community and African community, can take the responsibility for the primary education of our children, their primary academic development. Whereas the public schools and the charter schools pretty much have taken responsibility for, okay, teaching your children algebra. Well, I say that we should be the ones teaching them algebra, either in the household or in the community, or somebody from the block or the neighborhood, or an online resource like All This Math. And then when they go to school, if they still go to school, because we haven't built the network of independent schools yet, or schools for them in that particular community, then when they go to the public and charter schools that currently exist, they go there for the purpose of practice. So they're not going there they're not going there like a blank slate. You're not showing up to, your public school or your charter school or your parochial school in 7th grade, having never seen an equation before and not knowing how to solve it. And Miss So-and-so, the racist white girl who thinks she's not racist, but really is racist because she has very low expectations for you. She's responsible and charged with teaching you how to solve equations, right? My community already taught me how to solve equations. I just need you to give me the assignment so I can do the independent practice. And then I may have some questions about some of the nuances and some details, or I might make some mistakes while I'm practicing. And that's what you're here for, right? So that's what that teacher is there for. Whereas, so I think, again, another paradigm shift, so that we become the primary educators. And then, then when you go to school, you can practice. So it's kind of like with sports, like you mentioned, you play football. I played football in high school too. But when I walked onto the field for tryouts, in 10th grade, it wasn't my first time ever picking up a football. It wasn't my first time ever I grew up playing football. I played football in my neighborhood, played football with my dad. I learned things. I've been watching football my whole life, so I went there to practice and to develop my skills and become part of a team. And I think we have to do the same thing with academics. So it's like, okay, with physics, cool, we're gonna learn physics in the community. Then when I go to physics class, then I'm just practicing what I already know. Foreign languages, literature, all these types of things. You talk to young people, and I remember when I taught at Overbrook, the brothers, come to school, and they would roll dice to make their money, play cards, gamble to make their money. They didn't learn how to roll dice and play cards in school at Overbrook. They learned that in their neighborhood. They came to school to practice and get better at it and to develop those skills. And I just think we have to do the same thing with chemistry, biology, physics, algebra 1, algebra 2, trigonometry, calculus. Because if they're going into a place that is not nurturing and that is hostile toward them, then it's going to be very difficult to learn anything from anybody in a space that's hostile toward you. Because learning in and of itself is a very vulnerable activity. And you need to be in a space with a teacher that has some love for you, and the environment has to be a loving environment, at least that's my opinion, and a lot of these environments are not, for various reasons, they're not nurturing, the most nurturing for us. They're not the most loving for us. So until we get to independent schools, we have to put our children in a position where it's like, okay, well, if the environment's not going to be a loving environment, then we're going to need to create a situation where it doesn't need to be. And if you're just there to practice, then it's, you know, because you already know the material fundamentally, then it doesn't have to be as loving and nurturing. So that's what I think we have to do. And now we just have to figure out how to like duplicate and exponentially grow, you know, the resources so that, you know, people can, you know, young people can learn math from Black people in the community.
Indeed. And for those of you who are viewing, you have been seeing me throw out these links. And just to explain, this is the allthismath.com. This is Brother Akil's main business for the tutoring, you know, for the mathematics website. And he is working on, you know, putting more content on YouTube. So he does have a YouTube channel. So this is the link. Y'all can write this down and make sure that you subscribe and see everything that he is doing there. And so make sure y'all do that. And there was a statement, where was that at? By Lions Times, baby. He said to hook him up with the girl on the left in the ad, you're going to have to come to Philly. So I took that photo for the ad at the Doomday Festival. So I don't know if they are doing a Doomday this year, but definitely by next year, you know, so hopefully she'll be there. And if I see her, I'll let her know that you said what's up. All right. And if y'all have any questions for our guest, you know, now is the time to start putting them in the chats. For those of you who are watching on Facebook, you know, I think it should come up in the chats now from the Harold Johnson page as well as the asarimhotep page into the chat, so I should be able to see them. So, you know, what are your plans, your immediate plans, you know, regarding this work? And, you know, do you plan on continuing your education for the PhD track, or, you know, you're going to go into the private sector in terms of, you know, business, you know, like what's the end goal, you know what I'm saying, for you? Are you going to create one of these schools that you're talking about, you know? And, you know, if not, you know, if there are some people working on, like, what's the future looking like for Brother Akil Parker?
So, I mean, in terms of the PhD, I haven't thought about that a lot recently. Actually, there's a professor at Cheney who I was in the hallway on my way to my office, and another professor, he mentioned to me, he was like, you know, about thinking about going into a PhD in math. And that was the first time I had thought about, you know, a PhD in math in a while, because I've been so busy just doing other things. And I know that it takes a great deal of time. It's a time commitment. And I don't know that that's something that I would want to do. So that's something I would still think about. I still need to think about more. In the immediate future, I'm trying to build up the All This Math YouTube channel with a lot of content to provide a solution to the problems with math deficiency for our community. Because I see what has happened in the last few years, and I saw this coming, right? And I think this pandemic might also speed this process up, basically, in terms of getting rid of, to a certain extent, actual human teachers, you know, because we have to think like why wouldn't that happen? Like, we see what's happening, you know, in terms of like Amazon, Walmart's cashiers are being, you know, eliminated. Now robots, there are people that are training robots as we speak to take their jobs, right? You know, this is happening, right? Capitalism is all about maintaining the profit margin and increasing profit margins, increasing surplus wealth. So, and then the thing is, why would the education arena be immune to that? Even if people say, well, you know, a robot can't teach, you know, a child, or, you know, you can't have just watch a video on a smart board. But a lot of things happen in school systems that we don't agree with, but we're not the ones making the final decision anyway. So I think there needs to be online content, and that's why I want to create as much content as possible and have all this math be a popular resource for the youth to go to, where if they go to class and they say, I don't understand what this teacher's talking about, I don't understand how to factor this quadratic trinomial, I don't get it, then I want you to think like, I can go to all this math and see if there's a video up already. And I'm also working on trying to create a system, an efficient and effective system, where there's like a repository where people can submit requests, so it's kind of like how, back in the 90s or the 2000s, like we were young, when, we would request songs from the radio. A DJ would be on the radio playing songs. Now we have, something like that, And I see the comment, I appreciate the comment about the Black Khan Academy, but I kind of want to, with all due respectfully, I want to push back on that, because I actually was just talking to some people about that, because I don't want to be the Black Khan Academy. I think often, I know what you're trying to say. And I appreciate it, but I want it to be all this math that is actually superior to Khan Academy. Because what I found is that a lot of students that I've had to tutor, they have needed help on Khan Academy videos. They've needed clarity on Khan Academy videos. And I also think that that's something that, I've been guilty of doing in the past. It's kind of allowing, a lot of times subconsciously we allow whiteness. I mean, even though Khan is Indian, but I still look at Khan Academy as like part of the, I guess, Northern Cradle, like the Northern Cradle establishment. We can say, if we think about Jope's work, right? Northern Cradle, Southern Cradle. So we still think of it that way. We tend to like compare ourselves to those things. Kind of like when people say things like, Morehouse is the Black Harvard, or Howard is the Black Harvard. And it's like, I don't know if we really want to do that. I don't know if you really want to do it. I know why you're trying to do it, but I don't think we have to compare ourselves, use those white establishments as the standard. So yeah, but in many similarities to what Khan Academy is doing, but in a more effective and a more efficient way, and a culturally competent way too. Because like you can come onto the channel and you might see me with the ASCAC hoodie on, on how to simplify radicals, or I might have a Malcolm X t-shirt on, or a Marcus Garvey t-shirt on, or something like that. And I'm showing how to solve a system of equations, So, and I want to also expand this out, and I want to encourage, and I've been in conversation with a couple other people, math teachers, brothers and sisters, to try to start creating their own content. Because I think that, this is work that I can't do all by myself, so many children that will benefit from this, and not just children, but adults that could benefit from it as well. Because, adults that are in college or, going back to school, and also I want for parents to be able to help their children with their homework. So I don't want it to just kind of be limited to the children, because a lot of times, like, educational resources are only targeted at the children, whereas like we want to separate like the children from their parents. I still want the parent to be able to watch a video and say, oh, okay, now I understand. So now I can help you with the homework now, because that's what I want. And I think like schools kind of play this game where they want to maintain in loco parentis, whereas they become like the parent while the child is under their supervision, and it like removes some of the power from the parent. And I think that's another conversation that we have to have. Like, how do we navigate this concept of in loco parentis? Because then a lot of times when the child is not behaving a certain way that we would like for them to, or isn't responding, or isn't doing what is being inappropriate in some way, and then we say, well, what are the parents doing? But okay, perhaps the parents could be doing more, but we have to understand through in loco parentis, what often happens is parents are often kind of limited and kind of blocked off and obstructed from having certain power, over what their children are doing in certain ways. I think it's worthy of another conversation. But yeah, I want to expand the YouTube channel. I want for people to be able to use it. I want for people to know about it. I want for people to know that it's there, and it's an available resource, and it's a place that's culturally relevant to us. And I also want to start adding more video content where we're going to be having conversations about, why do I use this stuff? Or why do I need to know this stuff? Because I want to have like conversations with people in different walks of life, different Black entrepreneurs, so I can promote their Black owned businesses and, also show young people, oh, this is how we use that algebra. This is how we use that. Oh, okay. Now a lot of people are, investing in, the stock market, cryptocurrency, things like that. That's popular right now. But when you get into like, okay, well, how do I know how to forecast what's going to happen? How do I know what's a good investment? Well, there's something called technical analysis. And in technical analysis, you're looking at charts and graphs. Those are really the same charts and graphs that you look at. And so when people say, oh, another day went by and I still haven't had to use y equals mx plus b. Well, you could be using y equals mx plus b, because the same person that'll say, oh, I want to buy, I want to buy a whole bunch of Dogecoin. I want to learn more about that. The same person that says that will say, I'm never going to use y equals mx plus b. But if you understand y equals mx plus b, then that might dictate, okay, well, coin a good investment? Is it just a trash coin? Or, should I even bother with that? But when you understand the graphs, you understand the algebra, you can apply it to those things. And also real quick, I just want to say anybody that ever calculated their paycheck in life, if you ever calculated your paycheck for a wage and you got paid by the hour, you've used y equals mx plus b. You just didn't know it, but you did use it. And maybe the teacher didn't tell you that. So a lot of times that's been my fault. My problem early in my career, I wasn't that good with real world connections to those formulas and those equations and that content. I wasn't that good at that. So I've developed over time. But yeah, all of it is relevant.
Well, we're coming to a close and we have a few questions. So I want to, you to quickly, as best as possible, provide an answer. So Sunshine Love asks, how do independent schools survive and thrive? Assessment seems to be the tricky part.
That's the issue. How do they survive? It becomes an issue of money. Because people have to provide for food, clothing, and shelter. So when you talk about teachers and administrators, like, how are they going to get paid? I know of some independent African-centered schools that can't really compete. They can't provide a competitive salary to the school district of Philadelphia. So then a person has to make a decision. Like, I got a family to provide for. So, if you can only offer me like $30,000 a year, but I can go to Philadelphia and make 70 or make 60. I believe in this vision, but I got to provide for my family. You got to, just like, on an airplane, you got to put your own oxygen mask on first, before you can help save anybody else. But I think it's going to force us to think about how to be more creative with fundraising, but more so than fundraising. I think it's really just a marketing issue. And I've gotten a lot of pushback from different people when I say that, because they feel like I'm oversimplifying the problem. But I mean, it's a complex solution, but the idea itself, I think it really is a marketing issue, because the idea of independent African-centered schools is not marketed heavily enough. Like, you have the Council of Independent Black Institutions, and a lot of people, well-meaning Black people that would support an institution like that, or a body like that, or an entity like that, don't even know that exists. People that would benefit from all this math don't know that all this math exists. So this is self-criticism as well, that, we have to do a better job of marketing and, letting people know that certain things exist. And I think that when the demand increases for independent schools, then, the supply will come. But I think the demand has to precede that. But I think the demand will only come from enough propaganda. I think we have to have more positive propaganda around independent African-centered schools. It's got to be more propaganda. It's got to be more marketing, and then the supply will come, and then people will pay for what they want. And once the demand is there, then it's like you'll pay for what you want, right? But we have to do a better job of marketing the idea, and And then it'll come, and then we can have the conversation about, how are our tax dollars being allocated? Because then that's another tricky conversation, because then you say, well, if we're going to have independent schools, but we're still paying taxes that are supporting the schools that we're taking our children out of, then how does that work? Because then we gotta figure. And I don't have the answer to that. That's something I'm thinking about too. It's like, well, if we go independent, but then my tax dollars are still going to support the school that my child used to go to, then if you have thousands of Black parents in cities all over the country in that same situation, then how do we reconcile that? Because now this is money.
We would
We're just
have to
paying money
build.
into something we're not using.
It looks like we would have to build communities, where we actually live, to where our taxes would go to, those types of schools,
Right.
like if we was to make it. So like, it's a whole process. So the second question is coming from Non-Swirl Zone. It says, Brother Akil, how do you think Afrocentric independent schools could be funded? Also, is there a major role for technology, internet delivery of schools curriculum?
So I think, just like kind of like the fish fry, but on a larger scale. We think about scalability of a fish fry. I mean, it's got to come from the community. It's gonna have to come from the community, but it's got to be something that the community values. And I think the value comes from the propaganda and the marketing. Because it's kind of like one of those things where it sounds good to us, but it doesn't necessarily sound good to enough of us where we'll put money into it. So it's gotta be seen as something that's mandatory also. Like a lot of these things we've been discussing today, it's like many of us, we feel like, yeah, that's nice, or that would be nice, but we don't see it as an imperative. So it's got to be like an imperative. And I think that's part of our conditioning. And like a lot of it is like, we'll see a story about, a Black girl being like body slammed by some 250-pound white male, security guard or a school cop. And then, that won't, for a lot of us, that won't be enough to like push us, but I think we've kind of accepted that that's how America is. And that's how the school systems are. Right. But we have to reach the critical mass of people that are like, no, we need something different. And we have to actually create something different. That's why I'm hoping like, the online resource, all this math will be like, okay, it's online. Now let's start having more conversations about creating this. And then, also because a lot of us, we just want to improve. Like we get very caught up in trying to improve what's already there. And I just don't have the confidence in European society. I don't have the confidence in them that, these schools will ever improve. In fact, it's like a catch-22, because I believe that sincerely that the schools that our children inhabit, that are in the neighborhoods and, part of the larger school districts, will only improve when we leave them. That's the only time they'll improve. But by the time we leave them, we won't need them to improve because we've already left. Yeah. So in the meantime, there's no incentive. There's no incentive for them to, because they're not going to lose that per pupil allotment. They're not going to lose that tax base. They're not going to lose it because we're still there. So they have no incentive to, do right by our children. And I think again the end goal, that at least has to be the end goal. I mean, we can participate in some like education reform efforts. I mean, that's fine, but a lot of people, I would say, there are a lot of people that participate in education reform efforts that only have an end goal of the education reform results. They just want these schools to be better. And I just don't have that much confidence in those that are in control. So we can do education reform, but I think our end goal has to be independence. The education reform is just a stopgap. That's really all it is, and all it should be. I hope that answered that question.
And yes, he knows Dr. Carr. Mm-hmm. Yes, he knows Dr. Beatty. He, as mentioned before, you probably weren't here. He's also a member of ASCAC and presented. Yeah. So anybody dealing with ASCAC, of course, knows Dr. Beatty. But the last question in Dr. Carr is, how can we help? Need any volunteers? I'm assuming with all this math.
At this time, you can just help by propagandizing, just spreading the word about the YouTube channel and just letting everybody know about it. Like all Black people, because what I want is I don't want for anybody. I want this to be a solution to the deficiencies in mathematics. You know, of course, it's going to be a limit. I might, you know, my teaching style may not match up with everybody's learning style, right? And that's why I say I want to create a collective. I want to create a collective. A lot of people, a lot of, you know, Black people that know math, that teach math, that can, you know, develop an online presence. And, you know, so every child will be accounted for. So we can have a true no child left behind. not that stuff that George Bush and them were talking about, which really does mean to leave the children behind, right? We can have a true no child left behind, right? So every Black child, every African child is accounted for, and can go has a resource where they can go and say, okay, well, if I need understanding and I need practice, I have video content that I can go watch, I can pause, rewind, and then I can do my homework and I can become proficient. And that's the way. That's an example of the community providing the education, because I'm part of the community, right? Like I'm part of the community. So then, you know, the community, me as a member of the community, I'm providing the education. So then when they go back into school, they're just practicing. So that would be a great help. Promote the YouTube channel, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Reach out to me at my my email address. I'll type in my email address as well if you want to send requests for problems, specific math problems. You can send those to my email address. I typed it in the private comments. You can you put it in the, I can't type in the general comments.
You should.
Yeah, for some reason, I'm not able to do that. It doesn't give me a text box under the general comments. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So I put it in the chat, as well as the as you can see it on the screen here for Brother Parker's email address. So allthismath@gmail.com. So for everyone watching on all the platforms, you should have it. Righty.
Is it time to briefly discuss? Say it again.
Well, someone also wanted to know if you was on Instagram, if you have an Instagram handle as well.
Yeah, it's under it should be next to my name. It's at allthismath.
Oh, okay. Yep. Right there in the front.
Yeah, that's the business Instagram. But then there's also my personal _Akil_Latif. Put it into the private chat, and you can send it over. Do we have time to briefly address Robert Lee Moore?
Yeah, hold on one sec. So this is the handle in which he mentioned. And someone asked what I was drinking. It's just citrus Italian sparkling mineral water. So I don't know if the light is shining on you, really can't see. It's just mineral water. It's too early to be drinking alcohol. I don't drink alcohol anyway, but still, you know. But yeah, go ahead, brother.
Yeah, so I was doing some research. I found out about this white man named Robert E. Lee Moore. So you can see, you know, who he was named after. This guy, his father was from Connecticut, but moved down south during the 19th century in order to fight on the side of the Confederacy, right? Has a son named Robert, names his son Robert E. Lee Moore, among several other children. This guy ends up being, like, you know, a great mathematician, right? But again, one of the things that we don't do oftentimes in mathematics as well as in the sciences is we look at these look at these disciplines as race neutral, politically neutral, and they're not politically neutral at all. Like, we can see, okay, history is very political. We can see, you know, literature sometimes, but we tend to think, oh, math is just X's and Y's. It's just you're solving equations. There's no politics in that. It's very political. Very political. This man was he taught at several schools, but he spent most of his career at the University of Texas at Austin, and he refused to teach Black people. He was a segregationist. He was a hardcore segregationist. I mean, he knew where he stood. I mean, and the thing is, I'm not as mad that he was a segregationist. I tend to not be upset with segregationists. I'm only upset when they attempt to, because if you don't want to live near me, I don't want to live near you. That's fine. That's square business. But when you try to limit my resources and essentially steal resources which prevent me from building up my own community, then that's a problem, because then you're not playing fair, right? At the same time, there's stories about him where there was a black student at University of Texas at Austin. I want to say in the 1950s or 1960s. He came to me, wanted to take his course. He told him, "You can take my course, but you're going to start with a C, and you can only go down from there." Right. So this is like how this guy is, Robert Lee Moore. And there's just a lot of stories. And then we have to think about that, because oftentimes when we think about deficiencies in mathematics that our children have, we think of it as like they're going into these spaces in these schools, and the reason they're not learning is because they're dumb, or they're not paying attention, or they're just, too busy on their iPhones or whatever, and sometimes they are on their iPhones. Sometimes they're not paying attention, but this is a much larger issue. So we have people, and we have to think about kind of like the trickle down effects of education and what happens, right? Because when you have like, PhD mathematicians that are world renowned, that have trained many other PhD mathematicians, and there's this like genealogy of PhD mathematicians that come from, this white man, hardcore racist. You got to think, okay, well, this kind of ideology filters into the writing of textbooks. It filters into the creation of curriculum that goes nationwide. It filters into the educational consultants that are coming into the schools every August to do professional development and to create systems and create different educational approaches to Black children, right? It also, thinking about him and reading about him also reminds me of something Amos Wilson once said, which is that there's a political necessity for our children to do poorly at mathematics, right? What would be the result if more of our children did well at mathematics? Like what would we be able to do? Like think about just yourself on an individual level. So as an individual, look at yourself and think like, wow, like if I was strong at mathematics, what other options would have been open to me? Now take that and expound upon that, multiply that by 100,000, and just imagine what the Black collective then begins to look like, right? So many people, even people that go to college, right? Many people choose majors just because they're trying to say, okay, which major can I choose where I can still get a degree, but I can take the least amount of math classes as possible, right? Many of us will be great computer scientists, great engineers, great architects, great doctors, great registered nurses. The mathematics is the boundary. The mathematics is the boundary. So what if we had that strong math foundation from an early age, and then we can go into those fields, and then we start talking about, we talk about registered nurses, doctors, then we start talking about creating our own hospitals that we control, right? And that we fund, right? We can get quality healthcare, right? So we don't have to worry about some of the things that Harriet Washington writes about in great detail in Medical Apartheid. We don't have to worry about those things because we control that healthcare arena, right? But I want to bring him up because this is a reminder to us that this is very systemic. It's very systemic. It's not accidental, and this is part of the intellectual warfare that Jacob Carruthers discussed and wrote about. This is the intellectual warfare. The intellectual warfare is on all fronts. It's on all fronts. It's even in the mathematical front. So again, don't let people tell you. We understand in terms of history, right? That's like popular. I mean, you even got like white teachers trying to get in on it. Talking about being anti-racist educators, whatever that's supposed to mean. I don't know what that really means, but but mathematics and science and the STEM disciplines kind of have been immune to this because there's this fundamental belief that people have that those disciplines are politically neutral, and they're just not. They're just not. So if you're a world-class mathematician, and PhD mathematician, you're training PhDs that are in turn going to train other PhDs that are going to write the textbooks. They're going to end up in the classrooms in the hood, all across the country. And they're going to be the consultants that are going to go into the school systems and going to be talking to the school superintendents that are going to be telling them. Because again, you got to remember, a lot of administrators don't have a strong math capacity. So a lot of times, if you approach them and you say, listen, I'm a PhD in mathematics, and I think y'all should do this program. A lot of times they're not even gonna scrutinize what they're saying because they feel like they're not in a position to do so, which kind of makes sense. I mean, like, I'm not strong in computer science, so if Asar starts talking to me about computer science, I'm more inclined to just take his word for it, right? So the same thing happens, but we have to look at like who these people are and what is their history, and what is their political orientation, and how did they feel about Black people? Did they respect the humanity of African people? So we have a great example here, Robert E. Lee Moore. I suggest you to research him yourself. Everybody that's listening. Robert E. Lee Moore, University of Texas at Austin. He taught until he was 86. Taught until he was a gatekeeper, a defender of white supremacy mythology in mathematics until 86 years old. So 86 years old. So we have to understand that this is what we're up against. That's the intellectual warfare.
Well, I do appreciate you, good brother, for coming here and sharing your wisdom and experience. And I encourage everyone to again visit the various sites, allthismath.com, and subscribe to his YouTube channel at youtube.com/c/allthismath. And I see one person has already done that, who made himself known in the chat. And if y'all need to hit him up for any thing, regardless, hit him up at allthismath@gmail.com. And his Instagram is also, on his side of the screen, his address, and an additional, I forgot which one this went to.
That's the other Instagram. That's
Instagram.
My personal Instagram, yeah.
All right. So make sure y'all hit those up. And thank you, Non-Swirl Zone, for the donation. We appreciate it greatly. And someone asked about my contact information. As always, I share it at the end here. So basically, you just look up asarimhotep on all the social media platforms, and I should come up one way or another. And again, we're going to have you back, and we're going to talk about probably something more specific and narrow, and even maybe do a problem and show the connection between a math problem and some real life, htematics or whatnot. And so they can see it in action, and then and we can get more people involved. So please go to the links that I showed earlier. Make sure you subscribe. If you I guess you can do it more digitally as well now in terms of the tutoring services. So if your children need some help with the math, hire our good brother, saying Akil Parker to boost their mathematical prowess in these US and YouTube and world streets, as we like to say. He says we got time to see that now. No, I got to go to work. See, that's why it ain't one of our super long shows as usual. So I got to get ready to go to work and do my mathematics and computer science and all that other good stuff. So, but no, I'm definitely invite him back on. So if he has time, and we can maybe on the weekend, date, and we can stretch it out and do some things. So I want as always, I want to introduce y'all to the people I've been introduced to, and so and to let you know the network of great minds that I have the privy of being engaged with on a regular basis. So, some of you may know him, from ASCAC and things of this nature, and a lot of you may not. But these are the kinds of minds that are just walking by you on the streets, every day. And sometimes we don't say hi and introduce ourselves. So I just wanted to introduce our good brother and to let you know that, big things are going, for the African world community. And so I just want to thank you again for your time and your presence, and can't wait to get you back on.
Yeah, I look forward to it, brother.
All righty. Well, with that said, again, this Friday, we're going to have our sister, Stephanie Renee out of Philadelphia, with the Soul Sanctuary Radio and a whole bunch of other things. And I think, I think she went to Howard, we'll find out Friday. But the time, saying will be known at least by tomorrow. And I'll have the flyer out and all that other good stuff. So again, of course, join the Patreon page if you can, support. And again, check out our good brother's web page, allthismath.com, as well as the YouTube channel. So with that being said, y'all have a blessed day, start of the week. Continue to stay safe, continue to wear your mask, and of course, wash your hands. And y'all practice some math homework. Until next time, peace.